thanks very much for inviting me here. It's a real honour to be here to talk about our experience in the UK. I should say before we start, and if I didn't ask whether there are any consultants in the room, but we did what I'm going to explain to you today without any consultants at all. So I'm Kevin Sadler. I'm the, as the slide says, the Director of Civil, Family and Tribunals in Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunals Service. That means I'm responsible for all non-criminal work in the courts and tribunals. Just to give you an idea of the size of that task, in civil justice we have about 1.5 million case starts every year. In family justice we have about 350,000 case starts a year. And in tribunals, we have around 1 million case starts a year. So there's a lot of work going through our system every year. And today, what I want to talk to you about is how we've improved efficiency and effectiveness in 2 years. In numbers terms, that means we've reduced our budgets by 20% in cash terms. If you take account of inflation, that reduction has been 30%. Reduction, and we're performing better than we were before we reduced those budgets. It's a good thing we reduced those budgets because we weren't given them in the first place. The economic situation in the UK has meant the government has severely reduced its spending, and our budgets were reduced by that amount of money. So we had to change, and we had to make things different. But what I'm really proud about is that we made things better as well as making things cheaper. And I also want to tell you at the end about how, because we've done that, and I don't know how many of you were here this morning and you were listening to the discussion about pipes, but because we've straightened out our pipes, it means that we can now start to move to the next stage and invest in making things even more effective. So I just want to give you a bit of background now. Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service is a new organisation. It was only created in 2011, and in 2011 we merged 2 separate organisations. The Courts Service, which ran the courts, which itself was only created in 2005, and the Tribunal Service, which ran the tribunals, which was created in 2006. Now, I suspect most of you think that the English justice system has been going for a long time, and it has. And I'll tell you a bit more about why those 2 organisations were only created so recently. But just first, tell you a bit about what we're responsible for. We're responsible for all the courts in England and Wales. We're responsible for what's called the probate service, which is looking after people's wills when they die, and tribunals in England and Wales, and some tribunals in Scotland. We've got 17,000 staff, and it says 675 judges. Now, if you think that's not many judges, you're right, because actually that's the 675 full-time judges. We have over 5,000 what we call fee-paid judges or part-time judges and specialist members of tribunals. And as well as those judges and tribunal members, we also have 28,000 voluntary magistrates. They don't get paid, they're members of the community, but they work in our magistrates' courts and act as judges in our magistrates' courts. We've got 500 different locations where we do our business in England and Wales and Scotland. And this is who we work for. HMCTS, Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service, is run by a board, which has a chief executive, but we report to the Lord Chancellor, the minister in the government responsible for justice, but also to the Lord Chief Justice and the senior president of tribunals. So we work for both the government and the judges. We're operationally independent, which means they don't interfere. Well, they don't interfere most of the time, and they let us get on with making the operational decisions. But we report both to the judges and to the government, which really helps when we're working with the judges about making things better and improving things. So, we started in 2011, And I just want to tell you a bit about the challenges we faced when we started in 2011. Firstly, culture. I said the court service and the tribunal service, they only started in 2005 and 2006, and before them there were 70 separate organisations running justice in England and Wales and Scotland. The courts came together in 2005 from 43 separate organisations, 42 running the magistrates' courts and 1 running the other courts, and tribunals came from 30 separate organisations, all run by different parts of government. So when we came together in 2011, we were effectively still bringing together 70 separate organisations, and they were operating from even more sites than we've got now. It says 500 plus, but it was over 600 sites that we had. Because those organisations were individual organisations, they all had their own buildings. They had all had their own processes. So we've got lots of small courts and small offices which have 5 or fewer hearing rooms all around the United Kingdom. And if you go to a big city such as Manchester or Birmingham in England, you will be able to walk about a square mile and you will find 5 or 6 of our buildings. So we have lots of little buildings which are very difficult to run efficiently. Because we were separate organisations, we also have 300 different information technology systems, each designed for a particular jurisdiction, a particular part of the process that courts and tribunals run. We also have income. We charge fees for a lot of our work, for our civil work, for our family work, for some of our tribunal work, we charge fees. So one solution to not having enough money is to raise the fees. But we're also required to deliver access to justice. So we can't raise the fee, so people can't afford to come to the courts. So we can't buy our way out of the problem by just raising taxes effectively. We're not allowed to because we have to maintain access to justice. And I mentioned the money. As I said, the government has been severely restricting public spending ever since the financial crisis. And we have major reductions to deal with. One of the things we've had to do when we've been explaining things to staff and judges as we've made these changes is the money just isn't there. It's not been given to us. We can't have it. We have to work out how we deliver more with less money because we haven't got the money and it's not going to come. We know that for the next 5 years, our budget will be less every year than it was the year before. And that's less in cash terms. It won't be going up at all. And just to show how tough that is, I've just put up another slide here, which explains what we spend our money on and where it comes from. I really just want to make one point from this slide, which is when you look at what we spend our money on, we spend about 1/3 of it on staff, we spend about 1/3 of it on judges, and the rest goes on buildings and other costs such as interpreters for court cases, specialist services for court cases, and so on, and paper clips. What I want to bring out from that slide is that judges' salaries and fees don't change. Judges, the judges in the audience might be pleased to hear, their salary cannot be reduced. By law, their salary cannot be reduced. Judges can't be fired. They stop being a judge when they're 70, when they retire, that we cannot fire a judge. When you look at that, and you look at the buildings we've got, you look at the contracts we've got, actually only about half our budget can actually be reduced year on year. Some of the things you can reduce over, say, a 5-year period, 6 or 7-year period, because you don't perhaps recruit so many judges if you haven't got so much work for them, or you don't renew a lease on a building, or you move stuff into a building and squeeze it up. But the big changes in our budget have had to be made through staff and some estates, because we cannot change the other spending fast enough. So that means when you have a 20% reduction, When you look at those budgets, you're actually having to make a 40% reduction because you're only applying it to half the budget. You can't affect the other parts of the budget fast enough. So what do we do? Well, we had the advantage of bringing two organisations together, and we reduced our staffing by 3,500 people. Around 17% of the people working. And don't forget, I said it at the beginning, and I'll keep on saying it, when we did all these things, performance got better. We dealt with cases quicker, we dealt with more cases. And our staff told us, because we asked them in a survey every year how they feel about working in the organisation, each year since we've started, they've told us they feel better about working in the organisation than they did the year before. So remember that when I go through some of these things, because it might seem a bit surprising. When we did these staff reductions, we didn't reduce the people doing the work, people on what we call the front line, the administrators processing the applications. What we did was reduce the managers. We reduced the number of managers in the organisation by half. And we improved performance. Now, we didn't drag them out of the door kicking and screaming. A lot of people were quite old in the organisation. They were ready to retire. We gave them a bit of financial help to do that. But what we did by reducing that number of managers is we stopped the checkers who were checking the checkers who were checking the checkers. We took out the people that were saying no to people improving things, and we focused them on improving the organisation. So, I would say we reduced the number of managers by 50%. We cut the number of management layers. In some parts of the organisation, before you got to, when you went from the member of staff who was processing an application, who was inputting it into the computer, to the chief executive, there were 8 levels of management before you got there. So there was a manager of that member of staff, there was their manager, there was their manager, there was their manager, and so on through the organisation. We've now got 3 levels before you get to the chief executive. So nobody is more than 3 levels away from the head of the organisation. So we made a very big staff reduction, and a lot of people were worried that we couldn't do it, but we have done it, and we've still kept that level of management reduction. One of the ways we did that was move away from looking at thinking that we've got 500 courts and thinking about those courts as groups of courts. Before we made these changes, each court did everything. It tried to do everything. It had every part of the process in that court. We've now turned our 500 courts into 30 groups of courts, and not everything gets done in every court. The customers don't notice. They can still do their business with us, but it means that instead of having one person doing one particular thing in each court, we've maybe got 3 or 4 people doing it for a group of courts. It means they're better trained, they're more effective, they don't do something once a week or once a month, they do it every day. So they don't have to pick up the book and find out how to do it. They know how to do it because they're doing it all the time. So, we also closed some courts. We've got 500 courts now. We had 600 courts. So our least used courts, the ones that were next door to another location where we're operating another part of business, we've closed. We expect to reduce our courts even further because, as I said at the beginning, we've got too many small courts. If you have a small court, I don't know what it is in your particular jurisdictions, but we have a lot of cases that settle. In our higher value civil courts, over 90% of the cases that are started don't go to a trial, don't go to a hearing. And I don't know what lawyers are like in your countries, but the lawyers in England, they think about things at the last minute. Most of our cases get settled the day before, or at best the week before the hearing is due. And if you have a lot of small locations, you can't allow for that in the way you list the cases, you schedule the cases. When you have a larger number of courts, you can actually allow for that and allow for the fact that a significant proportion of those cases won't get through, so that you can put more hearings on and be confident that everybody will get their day in court. So too many small courts are not good for efficiency. We've centralised our back office functions. What we call back office functions is everything that doesn't need to be done in the court with a judge. So everything that isn't about the hearing and isn't about supporting the judge in doing their work, which is quite often the initial processing of the application, getting the paper onto the IT system. It's also about, we have a lot of undefended cases where people don't argue about it and a court judgment comes through. They don't need to go in front of a judge. So we've centralised those, and one of the particular things we've done is we've centralised all our phone handling. So if somebody rings up HMCTS in England, they will get through to a central team who answer the phone calls. We know that 90% of the phone calls we get can be resolved without the physical case file. Without the paper file, we have enough information on our IT systems to enable people to answer the phone call without that. And that stops the staff that are supporting the judges and are doing the administrative work in the courts from being distracted. Lots of people in the court service have said to me that one of the reasons we make mistakes and things take longer is we're halfway through something and the phone rings. Hopefully they answer it. They didn't always answer it in our courts. Lots of phones went ringing for a long time. And that meant somebody else, they rang off, they rang again, and they were unhappy. And so the phone call took longer. So what we've done is we've stopped people from being distracted by the phone calls. We answer them in one place. That means we also know much more quickly if things are going wrong. Our internet site went down a few months ago, and we knew about it because the phone started ringing in one place. And so that would have taken perhaps 4 or 5 hours to come through from 500 individual courts. But we actually knew about it straight away because people were all ringing one place. So that's made both our courts and the way in which we deal with our customers much more efficient. And we don't use it just for the short-term things. What we do is we look at why people are making the phone calls. And because we do it in one place, we get very powerful information about why people are ringing us up. Sometimes it will be because one of our leaflets is not very clear. Sometimes it will be because a change has been made that hasn't had the effect that we intended. And it enables us to use that information to actually make our systems more effective as we go forward. So we've centralised a lot of activity, and that has made it more efficient. We've also changed the way in which we enforce criminal work. Since we started collecting fines hundreds of years ago, technology and systems have got so much better, and so we are using private sector partners to work with us to collect fines now. And digital working. We're moving as fast as we can. It's not cheap, but we're moving as fast as we can to getting people to make claims and open their claims electronically rather than on paper. But what we've not done is we've not computerized the paper process. What we're doing is we're deliberately changing the processes completely so they work on your phone, on your computer, rather than you scan something and send it to us. What we've been very careful about, and what we're continuing to be very careful about, is not just changing paper into electronic paper. So we've changed our systems to do that. There's a lot more to do there. We've only just started. But what's really delivered that 20% savings I talked about, and really 40% when you think about what budgets we can really influence, has been our continuous improvement strategy. We call it continuous improvement. Other people call it lean. Other people call it the Toyota production system. We call it continuous improvement because that's what it is. It's about looking at our processes all the time and thinking about how we can make them better. It's about recognizing that our processes will never be perfect. There is no perfect process. There will always be something we can do to make it better. And so here I've set out the 7 elements of our continuous improvement strategy. And I will go on to talk about 3 key parts of that. But before I do that, because talking about strategies and talking about the way we do things doesn't really bring it to life, I don't think, I just want to give you 3 examples of what the continuous improvement strategy has done. We have something in England called the Court of Protection. It is where judges deal with people who've lost their mental capacity. They're unable to act on their own and look after their own affairs. And you have to go through a court process to get somebody else to take charge of their affairs. In the Court of Protection, we've taken out wasteful process steps. We've looked at the whole process that operates in the Court of Protection and taken out wasteful process steps. Before we did those changes, you made an application to the Court of Protection. It took 20 days to process that application so it could go before a judge. So that's 20 days of administrative staff working on things. If you were here this morning, you'll have heard that most of that time is not actually people doing any work. It's actually a piece of paper sitting in a particular place waiting for somebody to do something. It's somebody checking something. That 20 days is now 1 day. So we've taken 95% of the time out for dealing with that application. In that court, before we made these changes, there were 2,500 cases waiting for a decision by a judge, and it took on average 9 weeks for those cases to be decided. Now, there is a work in hand level of 100 cases, and instead of taking 9 weeks, it takes 5 days for the judge to make the decision. And all of that has been looking at the process, looking at what we do, how we do it, stopping work going from the administrator to the judge, back to the administrator, out to the customer, the person who made the application in the first place, and actually streamlining that process so we get it right at the beginning and we put it to the judge only once with all the information they need to make their decision. So 95% reduction, and from 9 weeks to 5 days. In the tribunal system, we have something called special educational needs tribunals. This is where somebody who has limited mental capacity or physical problems needs special help at school. And the local authority, the local government has to make provision for them to get extra help at school or to go to a special school. And they don't always want to do it because it costs them a lot of money, and the parent wants them to do it because it's their child, and their child is the most important person in the world to them. So we have tribunal appeals about disputes there. It used to take 48 weeks from beginning to end on those appeals. It involved the parent, it involved the local government, and it involved experts in either mental health problems or mental disabilities or physical disabilities. That 48 weeks is now 30 weeks. So we've reduced the amount of time there by a third. And we're well on the way to reducing that time to 25 weeks, so nearly a 50% reduction. And that's a very good example, I feel, about continuous improvement, because we've not just done that in the tribunal. We've done that by working with local government. And our biggest continuous improvement gains are when we've looked beyond the courts and tribunals organisation and looked at the people who we work with, whether it's local government, whether it's central government. We do 600,000 social welfare appeals, which are decisions made by central government every year. Or with our border. We do over 100,000 immigration appeals a year. And when we've looked with the organisations that give us the work, that make the decisions that people are appealing against, we've actually made the biggest gains. And in this case, we sat down with the parents of the children, we sat down with their lawyers, and we sat down with local government, and we've reduced the time by a third, and it's going to go up to nearly a half. Talking about social welfare decisions, another example is in what we call our Social Security Tribunal. We used to send out 50,000 duplicate decision notices every year. This is where the judges had made a decision, we told the department, but they hadn't got the decision for one reason or another. We actually found out they had got the decision, but they all stuck it in a pile in the corner, and it was easy for them to ring us up and ask for a copy than to go and look through the pile and find out the right decision. So we were sending out 50,000 duplicate decisions every year. We're now down to less than 1,000 every year, and it's still going down. And by working with that department, our Department of Work and Pensions, we've saved them work, we've saved us work, but we've also saved them £30 million a year in benefit spending, in the money that goes out to social welfare applicants, because they process the decision when they receive it, because we send it to the right place and they do the right thing with it. So instead of them carrying on paying people when they shouldn't be, they're not paying people because that person lost the appeal. And they're saving £30 million a year. So we've made ourselves more efficient, but in the process of working with others and making ourselves more efficient, we've helped them save some money as well. And finally, a final example, immigration appeals. I said we deal with immigration appeals where people have come to this country or want to come to this country, and the government doesn't want them to stay. By creating a standard process and by managing the resources, the people that do that work over the course of the day, rather than just over the week or over the month, making sure we've got the right number of people to handle the work when it comes in the morning in the post or electronically, when the next step has to be followed and so on. We've reduced the cost of that work, we've increased the efficiency of that work by 30%, just by looking at the process and making sure we've got the people in the right place at the right time. We've frequently found out when we've looked at our processes, quite often we've looked at them because people have said, we've got a backlog, we've got too much work, the work's building up, we can't cope, people are ringing us up and complaining about it. And we've actually looked at that work, we've looked at the process and the way we do things, and actually they've got enough people, they're just not in the right place to deal with the process. So they're waiting for something to happen rather than doing the work. Or a backlog's in one particular place and there's people are too busy there, but the next place the work goes, the work's not got there and they're not busy enough. So frequently, what starts off as people saying we need more money or more resource is actually comes to a realization that we've got the money and we've got the resource, we've just got it in the wrong place. So I just want to give you 3 slides about how we do this. The first slide is about what we call team information boards. You can see some people standing up, looking at a very complex board. It's not that complex, actually. They know what they're talking about because it's about their work. Every day, in every court and hearing centre in England and Wales, every working day, every team of staff, whatever they're doing, spends 10 minutes talking about what they did the day before, how much work came in, how much they processed, how much they've got left, and talking about how much work they've got today and what they need to, and how much resource they need to do about it, to do it. They also talk about the problems they've encountered and they talk about the successes they've delivered. By doing that every day, we've drastically improved the way we communicate through the organisation. If I or the chief executive need to tell people something's changed or something's happened or they need information about something, we know that within 24 hours, the whole of the organisation will know about that because their manager will talk to them about it at their team meeting every day. But it's also meant that people are identifying problems that day and thinking about how they can solve them. Now, most problems in most of our courts can be solved in that court. Frequently, it's about the fact that you've got unexpected number of applications, or that you've perhaps had sickness in the team, which meant that you haven't had enough people to do the work. And instead of that building up until you've got a big pile of work, that's actually identified on the day or the day after, and people move around the court or hearing centre to deal with that. So we're actually enabling our managers in the courts to manage the people and the people to manage themselves in real time to manage the work. And where they can't solve a problem locally, I talked about, if we had issues with our forms or a change that didn't work as we intended, they can immediately tell the next level up in the organisation that they can't solve this. It's a problem that is beyond their control. And then the next level gets to solving it. And so I've got a team responsible for national business processes, and so we can be told about something very fast and we can start changing it very fast. As well as the team information boards, what we've done is we've set up what we call learning networks. When we started with continuous improvement or lean, we trained a small group of people in the techniques and tools to deliver continuous improvement. We had to do that because you can't train everybody at once, but we very quickly realized that what we were doing was we were not helping people solve their own problems, we were solving the problems for them. And it's a bit like consultants. You'd get people in, they'd help people solve a problem, they'd go away, and because those people hadn't solved the problem themselves, the change, after 6 months, you wouldn't recognize the change had been there. So we actually now train all our people in continuous improvement. Not everybody's an expert, but everybody knows the basics. And we use our learning networks where every month people come together for an hour and talk about a particular problem-solving technique or a particular issue and how they've solved it to help people improve their learning and share their knowledge and skills through the organisation. So, we're managing work in real time and we're developing our staff so they're able to actually solve the problems that arise. We've also changed all our processes. If you're here this morning, what we've done is we've straightened all our pipes. Now, we're still doing this. Not every pipe is straight yet, but all our main processes, we've looked at them from the point of view of the customer. And when I say customer, I don't mean somebody who comes into a shop and buys something. I mean the people who use our services and the people who we work with. So one of our customers are judges. So we will look at things to make sure the judge gets what they want, when they need it, rather than something going to them, coming back, going to them, coming back, and so on and so forth. We've looked at the processes from the point of view of the government departments we work with to make sure that things are working efficiently there. And we've looked at them from the position of the member of the public, so that we give them what they need, which is generally the quickest possible outcome and the clearest understanding of the process. And so we've looked at every one of our main processes and we've taken out waste. So we've tried to take out the bends in the pipes as much as we can. And we've discovered a lot of things that we didn't even know were part of our processes. What we tend to find is that if a process has been going on for a few years, and most of our processes have been going on for a few years, there's a problem. And that problem becomes a big problem and somebody comes up with a solution. I always say it's a bit like sticking a plaster on your arm every time you get an insect bite or a cut. And what happens is people solve that problem, they put a plaster on their arm, a Band-Aid if you're American, and then they put another plaster on their arm, and And soon enough, you've got so many plasters on your arm, you can't move it. And that's what our processes look like. There were just so many solutions made to solve specific problems that the processes couldn't work properly. So we had checkers checking people's work, we had people checking the checking, and so on and so forth. And we've simplified our processes. We've now got a standard process for all the main processes. It's the way everybody in the organisation does that process. We've also worked out how long that process takes. So when people are standing at their team information boards every day, they know that if they've got 100 of a particular application, and that application takes 5 minutes to process, they've got 500 minutes work. And they know how many people they've got in every day, and they can look at how much work they've got, how many people. And what will happen is that if they've got too much work and not enough people, they will look across the office, and there will be other places which have got not enough work and too many people, and people will move to do different parts of the process to make sure we've got the right number of people for the right amount of work. And from that standard process, we've changed the way in which we measure performance. What we've tended to do is we've tended to measure how long it takes to do something. But what we've tried to do now, and we're still working on this because it's not particularly easy, is to think about how both the amount of time it takes to do something and the quality of that work. So I'll get onto it a bit later. We try and get everything right at the beginning. So if you get the quality right, the time taken to do it gets faster without even having to measure that time. You can measure that time, but what we're doing is we're getting as much focus on getting the work done right as the work done in time. It's actually, from my perspective, better to get it right than done in time. I'd rather have something done right and be a day late than be wrong and us have to start the whole process again. And we found, when we've looked at our processes, we've found too many times that what we do is something comes in, we find something wrong with it, we send it back, then send it back to the customer, they send it to us, we then find something else wrong with it. We send it to them, they send it to us, and sometimes that can happen 3 or 4 times. Now what we try and do is we try and find the 4 things they've got wrong and tell them in one go. And even better, we try and redesign our forms and the way in which we communicate with people so they don't get it wrong in the first place. So we've changed the way in which we manage our work. We've changed the processes. We've changed the way we measure the processes. And bringing it all together is what we call problem solving. I said at the beginning that we do continuous improvement, and we work on the basis that it is never right. There is always something to do to improve things. So we're very focused on continuous problem solving. If we all understand the process and we all understand what good performance looks like, it enables us, and we're managing it every day, enables us to spot problems quickly. And if we've been trained in continuous improvement techniques, we can solve those problems. Or if we can't solve them, we can tell the next level up in the organisation that we can't solve them and invite them to do it. And what we really try to focus on in problem solving is what we call failure demand. I've talked about it a bit earlier. It's about where we have to do work because something's gone wrong. It's either because we've done it wrong or because our customer or the government department we work with, or even judges don't get things wrong, obviously, but sometimes their handwriting's a little difficult to read, for example. If something has caused us to do more work than we needed to, we call it failure demand. So from my perspective, pretty much every phone call we get is failure demand. If people are ringing us up, it's because the information they've got isn't enough to enable them to do what they need to do. Or they're ringing us up because they've been waiting 3 weeks and they don't know what's happening. So pretty much every telephone call we get is about something not working as it should be. So we try and use that information, and we do that with our, as I said, with our telephone calls. We do that at our team meetings every day. We look at what is causing us to do work that isn't productive work. I mean, you heard this morning, the view there this morning was that 5% of what our people do is actual productive work. Now, what we're trying to focus on is, if it's 95%, if it's some other figure, we're trying to focus on the non-productive activity and to understand why that's happening and then to change our systems so it doesn't happen anymore. So we've been doing this for about 2.5 years now, and we didn't start 2 years ago. We were actually doing this in Her Majesty's Court Service and the Tribunal Service before this new organisation came along, but it takes a bit of time for the benefits to come through. So we really started seeing the benefits in the last 2 years. And we felt confident enough about what we're doing now, and we feel that our people have been developed enough in how to do it, that we've pulled it all together and called it the HMCTS Way. And this is what all our people get. When you start in the organisation, you'll see this, and it tells you 16 things about how we do things in HMCTS. I'm not going to go through all 16 things. I've got 15 minutes left according to that clock, so I'm not going to go through all 16 things. I just want to pick out 3 things for you. The first one is the first statement. Continuous improvement is the way we do things. That is how we work. It isn't something we do when we've got a problem. It isn't something we do when we run out of money. The way we run the business is through continuous improvement. Number 7, we understand what our customers want and work out how to do that. If we're going to remove what I've called failure demand, if we're going to remove the non-productive activity from our organisation, the stuff that gets in the way of what we're really here to do, we have to understand what our customers want. And as I said, that's not just the person that turns up in court. It's the judges, it's other departments, it's all the users of the systems. And we have to design our systems so it gives our customers what they want. If our customers will get what they want, they're happy. They're not ringing us, they're not writing complaints, they're not causing issues. So we have to understand what our customers want. And the final one, we aim to get things right first time and do not create or pass on problems. So again, removing waste from the system. So that is how, in HMCTS, we do continuous improvement. Now, I think I've said at least twice that continuous improvement works on the basis that there is no perfect system and that we can always make it better. And we also believe we can make continuous improvement better. We're not perfect by any means. There is still too much waste in our system. There are still processes that don't work as well as they could. There is definitely too much paper in the system. But we now believe that we're in a position where we can move to the next stage of reform in the courts. I said at the beginning that I know that our budget will go down every year for the next 5 years. And I don't believe, and I don't think the government believes either, that after those 5 years are over, it's going to get any bigger. It's still not going to be enough for us to carry on as we are. So now we have delivered £280 million worth of efficiency in the organisation over the last 2 years. So now we are spending £280 million less than we did 2 years ago every year. We now need to think at the next stage. And we believe, straightened out our pipes. We understand what the most efficient way of working in the organisation is. So we are now looking to invest some money in developing an organisation which supports those processes. So Only now are we looking at how we can improve our information technology to support the new processes. If we'd have done that 2 years ago, we'd have spent a lot of money and we'd have ended up with a lot of complicated processes supported by information technology. We'd have more stuff on screen and less paper, but we'd still have a very inefficient process. Now we believe we've got a more efficient process. We can now look at how we can use information technology to support that. And because we understand the end-to-end processes, the processes which involve other departments, whether it's state prosecutors, whether it's social welfare departments, whether it's immigration departments, local government, because we understand how their processes work and how the end-to-end processes work, we can do that with them and make sure that we've got a system that makes our process more efficient and their process more efficient as well. We're looking at how we change our organisation in the state. I talked about how some of our small courts and small hearing centres don't allow us to work as efficiently as we can. However efficiently we can organise the staff within it, there is still time lost because we haven't got a critical mass of size to enable us to work efficiently. And we're looking at how we work in collaboration, as I said, with other agencies to change the whole end-to-end process. We believe that we're going to have to spend about £600 million on this, on new technology, on closing some of our locations and opening new, better ones that are more efficient, and in working with others to improve things. But we believe that £600 million will save £1 billion. It'll save £1,000 million. So we think it's worth doing, but we only think it's worth doing now. As I said, if we'd have done this 2 years ago, I think you'd probably switch those figures round. We'd probably spend £1 billion to save £600 million. It's only because we've operated continuous improvement, we understand our processes, we've eliminated waste, or we're on our way to eliminating waste, that we can actually be confident in spending that money and know we'll get more back for it. And I know that because I've been a civil servant for nearly 30 years, and I've seen program after program, I've seen information technology system after information technology system, which has cost more than it's saved. And that's one of the reasons why we've got 300 plus information technology systems at the moment, all operating on one PC, but 300 different applications within that, and why we're here now. So it is continuous improvement that's enabled us to do this, rather than this enabling us to make the efficiency. And so that's where I come to the end of what I need to say. But I'm very happy to answer any questions people have got for me. I'm very conscious that I've been talking for 50 minutes now, and I'm slightly worried that somebody didn't understand something crucial I said at the beginning.
Okay, any questions for the speaker? No? Yes? The question is that during your reform, have you reviewed what the judge is doing, and maybe some functions from the judges were taken to the supportive staff, so the judge would be focusing on the judge work?
Yes, as part of looking at our process, we have done that. With 17,000 people, I have to say that a lot of the efficiency has come from making the administrative staff more efficient. But to give you an example, I talked about the Special Educational Needs Tribunal. We used to have part-time judges coming in and making case management decisions. So if somebody wanted to postpone their case, or they wanted to bring another witness along or something like that, the judge would make that decision. And we had part-time judges coming in and making those decisions. And different judges would make a different decision on the same facts. And so instead of having judges make those decisions, the judges and we didn't force this upon the judges at all. They didn't like doing this, it was just shuffling papers. We got what we call legal advisors, so they're legally trained people that make the decisions independently of the administration under the supervision of the judge, but we got legal advisors to make those decisions. Those legal advisors' decisions, their salary is half that of a judge, and they make those case management decisions. And the judges like it because they're doing the difficult stuff, the stuff they came to be a judge to do. The customers like it because the same legal advisor is making the decision all the time, so they get consistent decisions. It won't be a different decision on a Tuesday than a Wednesday if the facts are the same. And we like it because it's more efficient. And there are other examples of where we're working with the judges because they're very valuable judges. They cost us a lot of money, but they're also a very valuable resource. And what we need to do is we need to give them the work that only they can do and find the things that they don't need to do and get it done by somebody else.
Thank you. Ir dar norėjau vieną klausimą dėl konkretaus darbo teisėjo.
Another question just for about the just specifics of the judge work.
Yeah.
Man teko girdėti, kad Airijoje mūsų teisėjams viešint Dubline teisme, jiem buvo paaiškinta, kad teisėjas visiškai neužsiima byloje žyminio mokesčio bei bylinėjimosi išlaidų skaičiavimu. Tai nėra jo darbas.
The story they heard during the visit in Ireland, so what's the case in the UK as well, that when you, that the judge is not the one who calculates how much the parts have to pay for the the judges are not the ones who calculate and administrate the payments to the system. So how it's in UK? Does it the judge who decides how much?
Administrative payments in terms of what social?
Fees.
Stamp fees.
Oh, fees. No. The government decides the fees. So.
But who calculates?
Who calculates them? We calculate them. People. In fact, most of the time, our customers calculate them. So if you want to take an action, we have leaflets and we have the internet, and people work out how much they have to pay. Am I answering the right question here? I'm not sure.
Taip, bet aš norėjau klausti, sakykime, nepilnai sumoka mokestį. Ieškovas kreipiasi į teismą ir jisai sumoka žymiai mažiau. Jis nesumoka pilnai ir tada pas mus teisėjas, jis turi rašyti nutartį ir įpareigoti primokėti pilną mokesčio sumą.
The question is that in case the part of the participating part is not paying, like they didn't pay how much had to be paid. Right. So in our case in Lithuania, it's a judge's responsibility to write the decision to make sure that the parts pay how much they need to pay.
Right. Okay.
Ar teisėjas skaičiuoja, kiek turi mokėti ir įpareigoja sumokėti pilnai?
Is it the judge's responsibility to make sure that the payments are received?
It's not the judge's responsibility to make sure the payments are received. It's either the administrators seek to get that money, or we have people who work in the private sector, bailiffs, who seek to get that money. So the judge's responsibility stops when they make the judgment.
Bet čia iki teismo sprendimo, ne, dar antstolių nelieskime, čia iki teismo sprendimo. Iki teismo
Before
sprendimo,
the decision is made. Like only the fees for the courts.
Oh, fees for the courts. Well, that's, we collect that. Administrators.
Administracija. Ir teisėjas nėra atsakingas už tai, kad, sakykime, jisai nepareikalavo mokesčio ir panašiai.
So it's not the judge's responsibility.
No. The administrator, we only put it before a judge if they've paid the fee.
Ir taip pat, sakykime, atleidimo nuo žyminio mokesčio klausimą taip pat sprendžia personalas, o ne teisėjas.
And exemptions to pay, that's a decision by the judge or not?
No, we, again, administrators make that decision. If you're in receipt of social welfare benefits or your income is below a certain level, we will reduce the fee or say you don't have to pay the fee, and administrators do that calculation as well.
Administratoriai daro tą, ne teisėjai.
Thank you very much.